something to which we should be paying policy attention.
I think it would repay your efforts to think about ways to to remove some of the barriers to the recovery in housing. I don't think it's purely a market phenomenon. I think there are a number of legal and administrative and regulatory barriers to housing being as strong as it should be.
Thank you. Shifting gears for a second and going to Europe, could you comment on, in the last 30 days or 60 days, has a recovery or a positive solution in Europe, is it closer or farther away in your view? And can you, and we can't control this, but yet if they were to have a failure of some sort over there which was not well constructed or whatever, that would affect us. Could you comment on where you think Europe is today and what impact it would have on us, even though we can't control it, if they were to have some form of failure or collapse?
Certainly, Congressman. So there have been a couple of positive developments. The European Central Bank has provided extensive financing to the European banking system and will provide another round of financing at the end of this month. That has had the benefit of reducing some of the stresses in the banking system. It has even gone so far as to bring down, to some extent, the borrowing costs of some of the more fiscally troubled countries as well. So that's taken away some of the financial stress and has given a little bit more breathing space. There's also been progress made in terms of a international agreement within the Eurozone to have mutual surveillance of fiscal policies to try and get long-term agreement on fiscal stability within the Eurozone and within individual countries, and that's a necessary condition for a full solution. So those are positive things. But there's an awful lot remains to be done. The Greek negotiations are still ongoing. We don't know how those are going to come out. The banking system remains undercapitalized. It's been contracting its credit, which has been contributing to a weakening in economy in many countries in Europe. And I think, you know, the backstops that are needed to protect, if one country has problems, to protect other countries from contagion. The Europeans have been setting up financial backstops to do that. There's still a lot of uncertainty about the size of those backstops and how they be used and so on. More work needs to be done there. But I think it's important to finally just to conclude that there are some really deep fundamental problems, not just fiscal issues, slow growth issues, but also issues of competitiveness. Countries on the periphery like Greece and Portugal are not at all competitive to Germany. They have big current account deficits. They cannot change the value of their exchange rate because they're tied to the euro. So it's going to be a very difficult process for them to get to a more competitive situation, and that all those things put together mean that you could have very slow growth in some European countries for quite a while.
Ms. Kester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Bernanke, the economy is creating jobs. We've had 22 months of private sector job growth. The unemployment rate is at its lowest level for 3 years, and it's very noticeable at home in Florida. You know, in 2007 and 2008, the headlines in the newspapers were devastating about companies closing and people losing jobs, and it's noticeably different. It was noticeably different last year with stories about companies hiring. It's pretty steady right now, but obviously we can do better. And I mean, you have said in your testimony, you said a more robust recovery will lead to lower deficits and debts in coming years. So here's the frustration, and our colleague who gave us the list of ways to reduce the debt and deficit, it was very noticeable that he did not include job creation in that list. It was cut spending. We're doing that in the Budget Control Act. We did that. We need to do more. Entitlements, there's some common ground we could find there. But he left off that very important list, job creation. And Dr. Elmendorf from the CBO testified yesterday that yes, if we had a lower unemployment rate, we would have a lower deficit. And that followed up on his letter of October we use technical language. It says the underutilization of capital and labor resources in the economy. If we had better utilization, if we had more people working, the projected federal deficit under the current law in fiscal year 2012 would be about 1/3 lower. That deficit would be equal to about 4.0% of gross domestic product, compared with 6.2% projected for 2012 in the CBO's baseline. If the economy were operating at its potential, the deficit would be lower because incomes and therefore revenues would be higher, while the rate of unemployment and therefore outlays for certain government programs would be lower. So here's our frustration, and the frustration of folks back home. They know we can be doing more to reduce the deficit and put people back to work, but the Congress has not been able to get off the dime and come to common agreement on ways we invest in infrastructure and research and development. So give us some words of wisdom on this. Going forward, what do you believe are the most effective policy options that all of us can pursue to speed job creation and thereby lower the deficit?
Well, Congresswoman, first of all, I'm glad to hear that the tone is a little better in Florida. That's good. There has been some progress, obviously, but it's still very slow. In my testimony, I think, 3 related points about fiscal policy. The first is that whatever we do for confidence purposes and for long-run sustainability, we got to keep our eye on the long term. We got to make sure that we have a credible plan put in place that will be moving us towards stability and sustainability in our fiscal policies over the next few years and into the subsequent decades. So I think we got to keep that part always on the table. I think that's really important. Secondly, I think we can avoid, if we can avoid unnecessary disruption to the recovery. I think that's important. Mr. Ellendorf, I'm sure, pointed out that under current law, there's going to be a massive fiscal contraction in 2013. Without addressing any of the specific policies involved, I think Congress should be aware of that and try to avoid having too big a hit on the recovery in 2013. And then finally, again, without taking specific policies, the side of specific policies, I think my third point was that fiscal policy is not just about total spending and total taxes. A lot of it is the quality of the budget. I mean, are the things we're spending on, are they going to help our economy? Do they support R&D or